Go Big 12 or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by Drew Russell. Drew Russell, how's it going, buddy?
Brandon
What a weekend
Shanahan,
of
it
college
has
football.
been a fantastic run. We've got some bowl games upcoming this week. That's exciting. Big 12 basketball already more than a month in, and we've got, what, 5, 6 ranked teams in that. That's super exciting. We got a former Iowa State quarterback as the front runner for the NFL MVP. What a wild time that we live in, and we've got a lot to talk about on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Brock Purdy because I didn't want to talk about him. But before I do, if you're listening and you're hearing my voice or watching my face, hit the like button for God's sakes. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't even have to like us. But if you're in this moment with us, just do it. Just do it.
It's simple. I mean, just like every single time Brandon hits on a 8-way parlay every single Saturday, just one click and you're an instant winner, and you're a winner here by clicking on the like button.
Absolutely. But I just want to get that out there because we do have a Big 12 alum as the front runner, as one of the front runners for NFL MVP, which is very silly to think about because from our time watching Brock Purdy as a Cyclone, it was a lot of fun. I loved him as a Cyclone. It was a blast. He was a very big program guy. He accomplished things for the program that, not all programs in Iowa can say. I mean, he won a New Year's Six bowl game. Only team in the state of Iowa to do that. Just want to throw that out there. But now you just didn't think it would translate to the NFL.
Oh, no. I mean, well, and every single team didn't necessarily think so either, since he was the last pick in the draft. Most didn't think he would even make the Niners. When he made a backup position, I think people said, in the state of Iowa at least, that were following him, like, hey, good for Brock to get a backup position, be a member of the 53-man team in San Francisco. That's a great accomplishment, and it is. But for him to go from that to how many career starts, about 17, 18 career starts in, to an MVP frontrunner. Look, if you're part of the national media news cycle and people are debating whether you're good or not, that means you've made you're relevant enough that they want to talk about you all the time. And Brock Purdy, he's made himself a strong case this year. San Francisco is a great team, but you need a straw to stir that talented drink. And man, he's getting that job done. He's been just tremendous.
Yeah, and I think, to me, it's very obvious that he, at least this season, has been a very good NFL quarterback. There's this argument that he's benefiting from all the talent around him and benefiting from a mind like Kyle Shanahan. And while all that's true, he's still playing very good. He's making great throws. He's taking care of the football. And I'll tell you what, Drew Russell, you look at any great NFL quarterback, they are a system quarterback. And I'm talking about Tom Brady and Tony Romo is the next name that came to my mind. I don't think I wanted to include him in this list, but Tony Romo was the next name. Troy Aikman, John Elway, Joe Montana, Steve Young. All those guys are system quarterbacks. You can't succeed as a quarterback without a good system.
Correct.
And there's also guys who were viewed far more talented than Brock Purdy ever was, and Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. I think they even had another quarterback from the state of Iowa who stunk as a starting quarterback. So I just want to throw that out there.
He played the other week. CJ did.
I did.
Down in Jacksonville. He had a backup.
Out?
They lost. He cost me my fantasy football season, though.
Oh, no.
He cost me a shot at the playoffs. I was slated to win. I had Jake Browning starting. Cincinnati scored. I was in good shape, and I just needed Jacksonville to get stopped. I was going to win by 2. They went down, kicked a field goal. They go to OT, and I was facing McPherson. Browning didn't get enough points. McPherson kicked a field goal. I lost by 0.5. That kept me out of the playoffs.
Heartbreak.
Brutal. So I do have a bone to pick about CJ Beathard. So no one else cares about my fantasy football woes, but that's, since you brought up, I had to get out of the way. Go on, Brandon.
Yeah, and so there have been other guys who have come through the system, and Trey Lance last year having the access to the same talent, and he got traded for a 4th round pick.
Yeah, I know.
at some point you got to get the job done, and Brock Purdy's done plenty of getting the job done, especially this week. Hey, fellas, watch the games, dude. He had some awesome down the field
Mhm.
throws that you don't see from every NFL quarterback, mind you. It's not like he's dinking and dunking, which, by the way, is something. To dink it
Mhm.
in the NFL is tricky, but he's doing it all. He's getting the ball down the field. He's taking care of it. He's making plays. He's a good NFL quarterback, and I don't
Yeah.
know why that's a hot take.
Yeah, I mean, being an NFL quarterback's brutal, Brandon, because honest to God, in this league, the opportunities are pretty far and or few and far in between. So if you get a shot and don't succeed, there's many times you do not get another opportunity for many years, if not ever. Some players are lucky enough to get a second chance. Geno Smith, former West Virginia quarterback and a terrific player for the Mountaineers, that's a great example right there, Brandon, where this guy was a top round draft pick, goes to play for the New York Jets. Things don't work out too well, goes to Giants for a little bit, doesn't work out. Finally finds a system out in Seattle that fits his needs, gets an opportunity to play, and he took advantage of it a few years later. Um, so the chances are few and far. So for a guy like Brock Purdy to come in, take advantage, you have to give him obviously a lot of credit. And Big 12 quarterbacks across the board, Brandon, have been having just a really nice year in general. It's amazing how much of this league is represented. I know I'm going to miss some guys, but you go Mahomes at Texas Tech. You've got Jalen Hurts from Oklahoma. So much talent across the board. And, it's special for sure. Even Blake Bortles, Central Florida, even though, we don't see him as much as we once did.
No, not so much these days. It would be a lot of fun though. But I did just want to get that off my chest. He's a good NFL quarterback and very
Mhm.
deserving of any accolades that he's up for. Because there's always this bias when guys don't get drafted very high that they're not as good as the guys who aren't as good but got drafted higher. And this is the perfect example of it. Um, hate to see it. Hate to
You
see it.
do. You do. But kudos to I had to get Brock Purdy a quick shout out there, Brandon. He's been
Absolutely.
great this season. And NFL season, a lot to look forward to, of course, there. And of course, our college football season, we're going bowling starting this week, and a lot of Big 12 representatives there.
Absolutely. And we were talking before the show. I kind of realized that we, in our rage over the college football playoff committee last week, kind of skipped over the fact that the Big 12 championship game was played. Admittedly, not. I guess to be fair, not too much to talk about. I mean,
Yeah,
it
we mentioned the score, Brandon. We broke down maybe a couple of key quick plays, but yeah, for Texas, I mean, there's a reason they're playing in the college football playoff in a couple weeks, and the reason's pretty simple. I mean, they were able to be dominant, and they were a big favorite going into that game against Oklahoma State, and they did exactly that. They played some great football, really were able to take it to them. Quinn Ewers, breaks multiple records. Texas gets their 29th conference championship, title under their belt in the process. For Oklahoma State, a team just that wasn't playing at a very high rate later on, kind of as the season progressed, but still a great seed for Coach Gundy and his team. He was Coach of the Year in the Big 12, I think, well deserved. But for Coach Steve Sarkisian, this Texas team, I think they came into this year knowing they had to prove something, especially with going to the SEC next year, and they're able to get the job done and get one final Big 12 title.
Yeah, I mean, good for Texas. It would have been very sad to see them leave the Big 12 conference with one championship in the last 13, 14 years. So I mean, I'm
Yeah,
happy for them.
2009. 2009.
2009.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a mighty long stretch. It's always good to see the underdogs kind of get one. The folks who haven't been there before or been there in almost a generation at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
I
but
mean,
it does show the importance, though, of teams. Um, Look, the relevance of trying to win on a regular basis, because in this modern day era, if you don't have success for a while, people forget pretty quickly, whether you like it or not as a fan base. For Texas, you're dead right, Brandon. A whole generation was getting used to not seeing championships and everything. So it's a big deal for them to get that win, especially again with a big change coming next year to ride some momentum going in.
Yeah, and I will say, like huge shout out to Steve Sarkisian because what I think he's doing at Texas is the blueprint here. It does. He's not going to come. He didn't come in and overturn the roster in the transfer portal. He's building a culture, building the foundation of the house, and it didn't look pretty. But he trusted his plan. He trusted the guys that he's getting in. He still recruits at a very high level, and then now you have this. And the sample size for this isn't great, but unless you have like a Kirby Smart or a Nick Saban, the formula is to build up a program with a very high floor, 8, 9 wins in your worst years. And I feel like that's where Texas is now. And then you get a year where you bring back 10 out of 11 starters on offense, including Quinn Ewers, who's one of the top 15 best quarterbacks in the country. You bring him back, this outstanding front seven and great defense. And very experienced, and then you get everything to come together, and that's when you want to peak and have run at a national championship. And I think that's the formula, and it stinks that it's in burnt orange. But and it's also tricky because it's been so long since they were good. I don't think there's a whole lot of animosity as much as there used to be.
No, I would agree with that. And, that's kind of, in a way, kind of sad. In a way, I think having animosity and rivalries and building that off was always so important. But you're right. I think look, the landscape's ever changing, Brandon. We both know that. And I think that's just part of it is sometimes that stuff is going to die throughout the process, especially as time continues to pass on.
You're absolutely right. But it is bowl season, so we'll kind of jump into that here because I think there's a lot of good bowl games, especially for the Big
Ooh.
12. It's a real good opportunity for them to really batten down the hatches. And I got some stuff I'll show you here later on to push some more Big 12 agenda.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, bowl season traditionally is one of my favorite times of year, Brandon. I enjoy watching random bowl matchups. I like having games on during the middle of the day. I think it's kind of fun just to see different styles and teams. I think the debate's continuing on this year, though. It's been interesting to see with transfer portal. I think has been crazy the last couple of years. I feel it's even nuttier this year. And one thing that I think mainly it's because all these quarterbacks are transferring in and out, Brandon. You and I have talked about a little bit. Where are bowl games at right now, in your opinion, just from a general public's viewpoint? Because that's been, I know, a debate for many years now. But it seems, should they do something with the recruiting period, or you can't transfer till after a bowl game, or it might not matter. If a player wants to leave, they want to leave. They're not going to risk it for a bowl game. But I don't know. I'm curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's been a real big damper because I think that there's probably a decade or so, or however long Christian McCaffrey's been in the league, particularly, where it's like, oh, well, the opt outs are going to be what ruin bowl season, and that hasn't been the case really because you don't, unless you're a top 2 or top 3 round guy, you don't even really consider it for the most part, and that's what 90 guys who out of
Yep.
rosters of 50 plus players. So that, but
That's a great
when
point.
you
Yep.
get to the portal, where now there's 1,000 guys in the transfer portal, and
Mhm.
it's such a different game, and I don't know what the answer is because you have getting rid doing anything that eliminates bowl games is not good,
Yep.
but there is some restructuring. Times are different now, and I think we're gonna see. It'll be interesting to see when we reshuffle things after next season what that's going to look like because there's a chance that the playoff takes precedent over the good of the Bulls, but there's also just so much good that comes of it from smaller programs and
Mhm.
this and that. But I mean, even these smaller programs now are getting pushed by the transfer portal because now those guys are
Yep.
entering the portal and looking for greener pastures. So I don't know. It is interesting because it's definitely more of a spot where it's less, hey, let's end the season on a good note, but as I mean, almost
Yeah.
kind of like the first opportunity for some of these new guys to get in real game
Right.
action. Like I know
Right.
Kansas State's very, 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 happy to see Avery Johnson getting the nod here. I know Oklahoma's
Yep.
excited to see Jackson Arnold in their bowl game and this and that. So there is some good that's coming out of it, but I don't know what the answer is, and I don't even know if this is good or if it's bad. I'm just uh,
I think you just appreciate what it is and
yeah.
still enjoy, because there's still going to be some. Look, you see bizarre trick plays. You see, I mean, teams don't, they care, they want to win, but they're going to see some more just interesting stuff from an offensive and defensive concept standpoint. But I think with the playoff expanding next year, look, some of these top tier teams, when you hear about players from, look, Florida State, Georgia is a game that I know a lot of people have been keeping an eye on with the opt outs and all that. And it's because there's so much NFL talent on both sides for both of those teams. And look, I just think it's crazy for those big bowl games like a Rose Bowl and an Orange Bowl or a Fiesta Bowl or whatever, that if they're not playing for a college football playoff championship, they're opting out of these games, which, shoot, Brandon, 15 years ago, you and I are kids. I mean, I would have never believed it that somebody would say, I'm opting out of the Rose Bowl to play, to get ready for the NFL draft. And again, I respect the decision fully. If you got millions on the line and you're not playing for a national championship, I get it. I want to make that very clear. But it was unheard of 15 years ago, and obviously before that as well. I just think it's interesting how those games were once, and they're still big bowl games. Like the Rose Bowl is still a big deal. The Orange Bowl is a big deal. All of them are those big six. But when there's no national championship in play, to people that said, "Oh, cool, we won a trophy. We're not champions. We're champions of this bowl, but we're not national champions overall." And I think the point is, what's the point of playing? Why it's going to be fun to see when we go 12 next year. Nobody's going to be opting out of any of those 6 bowl games because they've got a shot at winning the national championship.
But and it is interesting because I don't know what the solution is for bowl season, but I do know one thing that's it's tough to say because what I ideally you wouldn't have the transfer portal be such a big player right now, but you have to have the transfer portal be as active as it is now because we got signing day here coming up pretty soon.
Yep.
We got guys have to get on rosters so coaches know what to do with the high school kids who are gonna come up with more of these scholarships and transfer portal guys ideally. So you can't do without the transfer portal during this time and then still have National Signing Day be where it is. So then
Yeah.
you have to push that back even further. And now you're messing with guys enrolling early. I mean, I don't know what the solution is at because I don't think people will be opting out for the NFL draft come playoff season next year. I mean, if you're a guy who's, I mean, say, so this year, who would it have been? Would it have been Liberty or Liberty would have snuck into the playoff, right?
Yeah, they would have been the representative as the 12 team this year. Yeah.
Well, now if I'm, a Liberty stud wide receiver who's got over 1,000 yards, a quarterback who's got 30 touchdowns or so, and I know that greener pastures are calling for me, and I don't want to waste that opportunity to get to a team like an Oregon or a Florida State or these big time players uh, who are gonna change my life
Mhm.
financially with
Right.
NIL money, and is that worth more than competing for a playoff? And then that group of 5 team loses their starting
Yeah.
quarterback or their star wide receiver and get cooked even more. I don't what and even
I
the people
can't
that really
envision that initially, but you know what, Brandon? I'm sure 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we never envisioned a world where players openly opted out of these big bowl games. I mean, these bowl games were the destination to go to for, they still are, but it was even a bigger deal. Like when you were a Big 10 team and a Pac 10 team, and they said, "Congratulations, you're going to go play in the Rose Bowl." I mean, it was a major deal. It still is, but not to the extent it once was. But nobody was going to opt out then. And now players are like, "Well, I'm going to be a top pick," which I again respect, but still unheard of. And obviously, it's a talking point amongst bowl games.
I just want to throw out the Rose Bowl is very special. That's why Iowa only gets to go every 25 years or so.
Mhm.
So very special. You
Mhm.
really got to cherish it because you know it's going to be a whole nother generation before they get into it. But you're playing like, hey, maybe the next time Iowa's here, maybe my kid's on the team. Who knows?
No,
Um,
they got to make the college football playoff now. If you want to play in the Rose Bowl, you got to play in the
yeah,
college
that's true.
football playoff these days.
That's
Yeah.
true. So I was never going to see a Rose Bowl again, is what you're telling me, Drew. So that's what you are telling me right
I'm just stating facts. I'm not saying
now.
they're gonna make it or not gonna make it. I'm just stating facts. That's all.
Well, and I'll tell you this: Dylan Gabriel left Oklahoma. If they don't lose to Kansas, they get another crack at Texas. They could be in the college football playoff, and now all of
Right.
a sudden he's not going to get that opportunity because Oregon's not going to wait around for their quarterback. So now Dylan Gabriel either doesn't get to finish out his career where he wants to and where
Mhm.
he's as a graduate transfer earned the right to do,
Yep.
and then Oregon may not get the guy that they want because I don't want to lose my number two guy waiting for my number one guy.
It's true.
So it's and then it just gets messy. And I think that we're not that far off from seeing scenarios like Dylan Gabriel could have,
Well, and
fallen
that's a
into.
good, that's actually a pretty interesting concept because I refuse to live in a world where like a starter or a starting quarterback or something of a team that's made the college football playoff. They're obviously going to be invested in that, but like behind the scenes with the new era of NIL and the new era of immediate transfer eligibility, like that would be an interesting concept if Oklahoma, let's say it was 12 teams this year, OU somehow finds a way to sneak in, and Dylan Gabriel before a bowl game where they would be an underdog, but they still made it. And he says, well, I at Oregon and I'm getting some offers from other schools and he wants to strike while the iron's hot or the fire's hot. And I mean, that could be an interesting deal. And they got to do something about that because I don't think it's going to happen within the next 5 years, Brandon, where you got like, maybe it does. Teams behind the scenes, like a team that's going to make the college football playoff, trying to maybe low key poach some guys once that season is done. But this era, I think it's anything goes. I think the only difference between this era and say 10, 15 years ago is it's just more out in the open these days. There's no behind the doors stuff, like kind of slimy underworld stuff, maybe what it once was. I mean, it's more out in the open now. And I mean, it's chaos. You can't even keep up anymore,
It's tough and it's changing every single year. It's evolving to different beasts. Because I remember Scott Frost did a very candid interview where he talks about it. He's like, well, here at Nebraska, we got great resources, we got great people, running the show, and just how kind of taboo it was because like we cannot talk to any players about this. We can't pay for play. We can't do this. And now pay for play is absolutely happening with these NIL
Brandon.
collectives. And the way that Matt Rule talked about it today on the Pat McAfee show, it is very different than how Scott Frost was talking about it just a few years ago, just two years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And it's such a different ball game, and it's crazy to think that these guys are going out and taking the best offer as opposed to what's going to be the best fit for me in my future. But it's kind of a big part of it now, and it's hard not to
Yeah.
be. But that's where we're at. And then now we got folks from the NCAA proposing things so the schools can pay them directly, which
Hmm.
that doesn't feel great.
Yeah. No, anything the NCAA touches, immediately people are going to be saying, can't do it, not done. I don't know where the NCAA is going to stand in 10 years. I mean, at this point, I mean, they're out of the football game pretty much at this point.
Yeah, I
These
mean,
conferences can break off, or I mean, if they want to. Every other sport, I still think it's needed. The NCAA,
yeah.
just some kind of a governing body.
Well,
But it is just it's interesting how little power they have compared to what feels like even 5 years ago.
yeah, and this does feel like a good time to put this pitch out there, but it feels like what the ideal scenario is that we have another body, and right now it feels like the College Football Playoff Committee would be a good body for that because they're full of college administrators. I don't like them picking the four best teams every single season as college administrators, but business and creating systems and structures and budgets, working with TV contracts. This is actually what they're good at. So it would make a lot of sense if the College Football Playoff Committee kind of breaks off from the NCAA, and the NCAA uses this as an opportunity to hit the reset button. Like, okay, well, now that we are a separate entity from football and maybe even men's and maybe even basketball, now we can go back to regional conferences. So you don't have, soccer players on 4-hour flights just to play a conference game on a Friday evening or however that plays out. It feels like we're right at the breaking point for everybody just to come together and say, all right, this has gotten out of hand. Let's settle down. We can have a world where we have these, national coast to coast conferences in college football, but also like let's let the NCAA kind of keep their tabs on all the other sports and this and that. There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to make it work to where
you'd hope.
It's got to be a way.
And again, we're going to see how things play out in the coming months. We've still got to figure out. There's still a lot of moving pieces we'll be talking about. We're still in season, but as the months go on into the off season, we've got to figure out from how the college football playoff is going to be determined regarding, bids and all that, especially the Pac-12's demise, what happens there, and the future of the NCAA. College football is a big money sport. Obviously, there's a lot of concern about mega conferences, but that's where we're at right now. And you have to adapt and change. And look, in a perfect world, Brandon, you might agree with me, you might not, that eventually I think NCAA and college football has to get back to a regional aspect in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if it's a good idea to go to a super conference or say, hey, let's just have all the top brands play each other over and over and make it what'll feel like more of a minor league system of football or, like that. I don't know if that's good for the sport or not, but the one thing I do know, it's going to continue to be chaotic because I don't know if the 20s have been a wild decade already, Brandon. No question about that. It has been off the rails madness. And college football, it as well as in that effort. I can't believe the amount of change we've had in the last 4 years in this sport. I mean, it blows my mind. It does.
It's crazy. And yeah, I mean, even 2 years from now, the sport could look completely different than what we see now, because this is going to be the last year, next year, where the college football playoff is tied into these bowls. Then they get an opportunity with a completely fresh slate. I don't anticipate, well, on one hand, I don't anticipate them doing anything drastic like what we had just talked about and like scrapping everything and picking, something that makes more sense what we have now. But I feel like we would have heard chatter about that. I feel like that takes a lot of time and momentum to carry on. But also, we've seen some crazy shit happen over just the last couple of months, it feels like, with conferences joining forces and poaching other teams in midnight board of regent meetings. And it has changed so quickly that you very well could. I mean, it could very well just be like, all right, we're going to keep the conferences as is, and we're going to have these 12 playoff teams, and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to have, what I anticipate happening is that they'll keep the bowl games somewhat tied into the playoff and then keep the rest of the bowl games, because that's what it is now, and it feels easy, but this does feel like an opportunity for them to scrap everything. So
yeah,
nothing would surprise
you believe me? When did here's today's trivia question, and it feels longer. When did UCLA and USC join the Big Ten?
Boy, because was that the first domino to fall, or was that OU Texas?
OU Texas was the first to fall.
Okay.
And that happened in August of 2021.
So then I would guess.
When did UCLA and USC announce that they are joining the Big Ten?
I would guess the summer of 22.
This last summer, 2023.
Wait, what?
This last
Summer 2023. Like 6 months ago?
6 months ago. Oh, wait. Oh, no. It was over a year ago. My apologies, Brandon.
Okay.
It was 2022.
Boy,
that USC press release got me. But it shows the change, though, of everything that's went down. I mean, look at the Big 12 quickly scooping up. They grabbed their new schools relatively recently. I mean, look at how quick that Stanford Cal move to the ACC happened. It all happened like that. And it all happened within a few days.
I mean, in
So,
regards to these 4 teams coming to the Big 12 and Oregon and Washington leaving the Pac-12, that was a matter of hours. Like there was
yes,
people went to bed on a Thursday night thinking the Pac-12 is gonna be a conference, and then they woke up and it was not a conference anymore.
yes,
Hours is the difference between some of these monumental aspects, which is insane to think about.
yeah. It's again, it is just mind numbing. I mean, it was a multi-year thing, but it just shows how much it's changed. And I'm just curious. And look, we'll discuss this all in the off season. We've got a lot of great football to talk about. But with the bowl games around the corner, I thought it was a needed conversation of just where college football looks like, because I think as we enter into next season, Brandon, there's going to be a lot of intrigue. I think a lot of people are going to be, I don't know what the right, not scared, but I think just wondering how this thing is going to work. And I'm sure it'll do fine. I'm curious if they'll draw more eyeballs to the TV screens and to the stadiums, and how much revenue will be brought in. I'm going to assume more, but how much can they keep tinkering with the product before people tune out, or maybe more people tune in? I think is going to be the great question.
Oh, perfect, Juros. What
And
a great week. I'm excited for everything that we're putting together for bowl season here. Like I said, we'll do a live stream here later this week to really put this together and go over the favorites, what it's going to be. So
mhm.
we'll get after that. Anything else you'd like to add while we have you here?
Yeah, I mean, what a time of year. We've got bowl season. College basketball has been great. Big wins for Kansas over Mizzou, their hated rival last week. Iowa State getting a win over Iowa. Big 12 is really well represented right now, Brandon, with like 7 teams in the top 25. And that includes some top tier teams in Houston, Baylor, Kansas, Texas OU, BYU's top 25. So it's going to be a heck of a year for hoops.
That's it, Juros. So we're talking about basketball next week.
We're going to find a way.
We're
We're
going
going
to
to get
finally
one
do it.
segment in, folks. One segment. 2024. It's our New Year's resolution. We're going to talk basketball in this pod. I
This
promise.
conference is too damn good to not talk about it. I mean,
It is.
what are
Can't
we
wait.
doing? That's on me. We're talking basketball next week, Juros. We'll make no mistake about it.
Can't wait. Can't wait.